Hello everyone, in this video we are going to talk about characteristics of quadratic functions or equations. So the things that we're going to deal with are going to be y-intercept, vertex, and minimum or maximum points of quadratics. So usually it's going to be these, I think it's just these three properties. So the y-intercept is the easiest one, so let's get started. We are working on IXL Algebra 1 BB.2 Characteristics of quadratic equations or functions. So the first question is about the y-intercept. The y-intercept is easiest to find because all you have to do is plug in 0 for x. So just do this. Replace the x with 0 and then solve the equation for y. So looking at my quadratic, I have x in here. I'll plug in 0. That's going to become 0 squared or just 0. And then minus 7 times 0. That's going to be another 0. So basically you can ignore the terms with x since you're going to plug in 0 for them. And then in the end, if I drop the left side equals the right side, that's the y-intercept. So since it says the y-intercept, we are talking about the y-axis. We are talking about y equals 8 up here. So if you just put 8, it's not going to be wrong. When you solve it for y. But if it says find the y-intercept, that's our y-intercept. Y-intercept is 8. If you put y equals 8 in the answer box, that's going to represent a line. But the intercepts are just points, like here. So again, that's why you don't want to put y equals 8, because that would represent a line passing through y equals 8, which would be a horizontal line. So let's just submit this. Then move on to the next question. Okay, this is different. The axis of symmetry. So to find it, axis of symmetry is going to be a line, a dotted line usually. That represents a line, which is why we need an equation. If we just put a number for the axis of symmetry, that means we are talking about a point. When you put a number, it's just a point, a location on the coordinate plane. So we need to make sure that we have a representation of a line. So in here, that's going to look like x equals a number. That number is going to be negative b over 2a. But what about that b and a? Where did they come from? So let me just put the general form. So the b and a comes out of the standard form of a quadratic. So how that looks like is, let me just put it on top of this. So y equals, or on this side, y equals ax squared. Let's say you have 5x squared, then a would be equal to 5, plus bx. Let's say you have minus 3x, then the b would be negative 3, plus c. Let's say you have plus 5 in the end, then your c value is positive 5. If you have like negative 10 in the end, your c value is negative 10. So those are that's the form that you extract a and b values. So in here, let's just rewrite this so I see all of the a's, b's, and c's. So this is 1x squared. I don't see any x. I need the bx. If there's no x, that means there's like 0x and then plus 10. So basically, this right here is my a, and then this right here is my b, right? Let's just plug it in. So to find the equation of the axis of symmetry, here's what I do. I drop down the x. Negative b is negative 0 divided by 2 times a. So when you just divide 0 by a number, the answer is going to be 0. There's no positive 0 or negative 0 at the high school level, so it's just 0. So basically, drop down the left, drop down the right, that's your axis of symmetry. You cannot just put 0. It is a line. It should be a vertical line that cuts your graph into equal pieces, which is why it is called axis of symmetry. Axis means it's going to be a line, just like the y-axis, okay, or the x-axis. It creates a symmetrical figure, which means it's going to cut the whole thing into equal pieces. Left side is going to be the same as right side. You can reflect them. They're going to go on top of each other when you do so. So let's type our answer in here. X equals 0. Again, don't put 0 only when it says find the equal of the axis of symmetry. Okay, this is another Y-intercept question. Let's skip it. You just plug in 0 for x when you are asked to find the Y-intercept. Let's do this one. Find a minimum value. Minimum value and maximum value. This one has a minimum value because the graph is going to look upward. That's how the graph is going to be. Because it's going to open up, or it's going to be upward graph, because the number in front of x squared is a positive number. If your a value is positive, the graph opens up. We learned about this before. So if you need help with that, it's called kind of like the vertex form, graphing the vertex form on IXL. Click the link at the top and see that assignment to see how you can kind of like extract those a, b, and a value when you have the vertex form. That tells you whether your graph is going to be upward or downward. Now the question says find a minimum value. That's to find a minimum or maximum value, and in general those are called extreme values. Let me just put it up here. Extreme values. If you see this expression in some other resources, that means they're talking about minimum or maximum, depending on the orientation of your graph. If your graph is upward like this, it's going to have a minimum. But if they don't want to tell you the specifics about that point, they can just use the word extreme, extreme point or extreme value, so that you need to figure out whether you have a minimum or maximum. But if the graph looks like this is not going to have a minimum value. That's going to have a maximum value at the top over here. But then again, both of these points in general are called extreme points. If they don't want to tell you whether there is a minimum or maximum, if they want you to figure it out, they can just tell you find the extreme values or extreme points of this graph. And then you first figure out if you have an upward or downward graph. If it is upward, you have a minimum. If it is downward, you have a maximum. And then you find the values of those points. But how? To find a minimum or maximum value, you need to first figure out the axis of symmetry. Negative b over 2a. You need to figure this one out first. Because that minimum value right here is going to be on that axis of symmetry. So that dotted line is going to cut the graph into equal pieces. So when you plug it in for x, whatever number that this right here for the x, when you plug it in, you will find the y value. Or same thing applies to this. You find the negative b over 2a, you plug it in to find its y value. Let's get started. So according to this graph over here, the a value is 1. Right here, the a value equals to positive 1, and then the b value equals to positive 2. These are the ones that I need. Now I can complete my step 1. which is about finding the axis of symmetry. So let's just figure it out. X equals negative b was positive 2, plug it in, divided by 2 times a was 1. And if you divide negative 2 by positive 2, the answer is going to be negative 1. So basically, x equals negative 1 is that dotted vertical line that's going to cut your whole graph in 2 equal pieces. We are talking about an upward graph, okay? So this step is just an extra so you can kind of like visualize what we are talking about. We have an upward graph because this value is positive. The arms are going to open up. The graph is going to open up. At x equals negative 1, the graph is going to be divided into 2 equal pieces. And at this point, that's your y-intercept. Okay? So up here at positive 7, the graph is going to cross this point. On this dotted vertical line, it's going to hit its minimum. And then it'll continue going up. So it'll look like this. That dotted line is going to cut the whole thing into equal pieces. The graph should pass through positive 7 because of this c value. That's the y-intercept. The minimum is going to be on the dotted line. So right here, we have the dotted line. Here. The question is, what's the y value of that orange point? We know the x value at this point is negative 1. We know that. But what is the y value? If it says minimum or maximum, it's talking about the y value. It's talking about how high the graph that point is on the coordinate plane. So how do you find that question mark? Basically, you take your function or equation, plug in the x value to find its corresponding y value. So drop down the whole function, okay? So step 2. Let's see if we can kind of name this step. Let's do plug in axis of symmetry. So we are finding f of, let's not make it more complicated than it already is. Okay, so let's just rewrite the whole equation. Y equals, I'm dropping down the equation at the top. Y equals x squared, that's my x value, negative 1 squared. I'm plugging in the axis of symmetry. This is what I'm plugging in for x. Plus 2 times the axis of symmetry plus 7. So this negative 1 squared is positive 1 minus 2 plus 7. So that equals to positive 6. So if I plug in negative 1, the answer becomes positive 6. So that point corresponds to positive 6 on the y-axis. So the answer to this, the minimum value, is going to be positive 6. So get back over here, put 6. I didn't put y equals because logically that's what, like that's we are talking about the y-axis. That's the first reason. And the second reason, if I put y equals 6, then that would mean I'm talking about a horizontal line passing through that point 6. But we are not talking about a line, we are talking about a point. Minimum value is a point. So let's just summarize what we did. If you see a question that says find the minimum value or find the maximum value, step 1, find the axis of symmetry, which is negative b over 2a. Once you have that, plug it in for x. Your answer is going to be give you the minimum or maximum. Okay, let's submit this. Find the vertex. Great question. So the vertex is, in the other question, we actually found the vertex. if you remember that in the other question, just so you can just visualize what we are talking about. The graph was passing through -1, right? This was like +7. It was an upward graph. It was like this. So the question, this was the -1, and then the y coordinate of this point, we figured out that it was +6. This is the vertex. So we gotta kind of like do the exact same steps as we did in the other question, and then write it as a coordinate. Find the axis of symmetry, plug it in for x, and then those two numbers are your answers. Okay, so let's get to it and then figure this out. So step 1, rewrite the equation so you can see the a, b, and c values. You have 1x squared plus 0x, since I don't see any x in there, plus 42 over 5. Now the a value equals +1, and then the b value equals 0, because the number I have in front of x is 0. So my step 1 is axis of symmetry. Step 1 is axis of symmetry, which is x equals -b over 2a. Let's plug in -b. That's -0 over 2 times 1. The answer is 0. Basically, x equals 0. This vertical line is going to cut the whole graph into equal pieces. It's going to be my vertical line. That's basically the y-axis though. So step 2. Step 2 is going to be plug in axis of symmetry for x. Bring down the whole equation, and wherever x, plug in what you found for AOS, plus 42 divided by 5. 0 squared is just 0, plus 42 over 5 is 8.4, but keep it as a fraction because that's what the instruction says. Write them as a proper fraction, improper fractions, or integers. So if I divide them, that's going to be a decimal. Now, what this means, my answer is going to look like an ordered pair. If I plug in 0 for x, y value is going to be 42 over 5. That's the vertex, the coordinates of the vertex. If it was about the minimum or maximum value, this would be my answer. 42 over 5 would be the only number that I want to put in the box. But it says write down the coordinates of the vertex, so I need both of the numbers. And let's just talk about whether this has a minimum or maximum. So this is going to be a minimum because I have 1x squared. It's a positive number. The graph is going to look like this. It'll open up, so I will have a minimum point. Okay? That point 0, 42 over 5 is going to be the minimum, the bottom point of the graph. Let's do one more. Minimum value. Okay. Let's get back one level. Well, let's do this. Okay. So find the minimum value of the parabola y equals x squared plus 10. I know it is going to have a minimum value, even if they didn't mention, they mention it, but this one is positive 1 squared. The graph is going to open up. I will have a minimum point in the bottom. So right here, y equals 1x squared plus 0x plus 10. A equals 1, b equals 0, c equals 10. I don't need that. But if you want to visualize the graph, that helps a lot. That's the Y-intercept. So to find the minimum value, step 1 is find the axis of symmetry. X equals -b divided by 2a. So x equals -0 divided by 2 times 1. So x equals 0 is basically your axis of symmetry. And just so you know, this is the y-axis. That's how we name the y-axis, x equals 0. Now, we are done with step 1. Let's do step 2. Plug in AOS for x. Drop down the whole equation, plug in 0 for x. So y equals 0 squared plus 10. This is just 0. Y equals 10 would be the minimum point of this. If the question was about the coordinates of the vertex, this is your vertex. Since it's just about the minimum point, the answer is going to be positive 10. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in another video.